Welcome back, second graders. Today is Thursday, June 11th, 2020, and I hope you guys are doing well and having a fantastic start to your day. We're going to jump in today with our math lesson. To be ready for it, you're going to need something to write with, and you're also going to need something to write on, so please go grab those materials. Now, as you're grabbing those materials, over the past 3 days this week, we've talked a lot about what a rhombus is, what a rectangle is, and what a square is. And yesterday, we found out that not only is a shape that's a square considered a square, but it's also a rectangle and a rhombus. And that's because it's a quadrilateral with 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. So we're going to jump into today's problem-solving task, and we're going to use that knowledge to help us. Your job is to identify the shape that does not belong and explain why it does not belong. So over here, this side is supposed to be all rectangles, and over here, this side is supposed to be all squares. So you first have to identify which shape does not belong, A, B, C, D, E, or F. You need to name that and then explain why it does not belong in that category. So if it's one of the shapes in the rectangles, why it doesn't belong in the rectangle category. And if it's a shape in the square, why it does not belong in the square category. And I'll tell you, there's only one shape that does not belong. So I'm going to have you pause your video here so that you can have as much time as you need to identify that shape that does not belong and to come up with a math explanation using the definitions of these shapes to explain why. So go ahead, pause the video. Awesome. I hope you've had some time to answer the questions. We are going to go over the problem-solving task right now. So this side, these 3 shapes all have to be rectangles, which means they have to be quadrilaterals, which you can tell they are. They all have 4 sides. They have to have 4 right angles, and they have to have opposite sides that are equal in length. So let's take a look at A. Right angles, definitely. And this side is the same as this side, and this side is the same as this side. Awesome. We'll see, just because it's here moving like a clock, definitely has 4 sides and 4 right angles. I can see those perfect square corners right here. And this side is the same length as this side, so top and bottom are the same, and left and right are also the same. Now I'm going to look at shape B. Shape B, 4 sides, 4 perfectly square corners, so 4 right angles, and the left and the right are the same size, and the top and the bottom are the same size. So I think all of these are rectangles because they meet the criteria, right? They all have quadrilaterals with 4 right angles and 2 sets of sides that are equal. Remember, this has a special name as an equilateral rectangle. Now we have to take a look at squares. Remember, we found out yesterday that squares need to have 4 sides that are the same length. They need to be a quadrilateral, and they need to have 4 right angles. So if we look at D here, we can see that's definitely a quadrilateral. Definitely have those perfect square corners here, and all of these sides are the same length. I can tell that. E, it's angled a little bit. If you want to have the flat side on the bottom, you can always, when you have the paper in front of you, turn your paper, you can turn your head, whatever works. But you can see here that these corners are perfectly square corners. So all 4 of these are right angles. So that's important to know. We can also see that these are quadrilaterals, and we can also see that they are the same length. So this is considered a square. Down here, F, shape F. Well, take a look at shape F. Is it a quadrilateral? Absolutely. Does it have 4 right angles, those perfect square corners? Absolutely. But is every side the same length? Absolutely not. The top and the bottom are the same length, and this side are the same length. So this shape is actually a rectangle. And we need to put it with the rectangles. So in my explanation, I need to name the shape. So shape F does not belong because it is a rectangle that has two sides that are the same and two sides that are different. I'm going to keep adding some more explanation here. In order to be a square, all, I'm going to do capital, four sides need to be the same length. So there you go. It's a really complete explanation that says shape F does not belong because it is a rectangle that has two sides that are the same and two sides that are different. In order to be a square, all four sides need to be the same length. So that's super, super important when you're figuring out if a shape is a rectangle or a square. Awesome. Great. We're going to keep practicing what we know about 2D shapes in these next types of problems, and we're going to focus just on our quadrilateral friends, our four-sided shapes. We're going to go over number 1 together, and then you're going to do number 2 by yourself before we go over it. Number 1 says, label whether or not these shapes are rhombuses, squares, rectangles, or other quadrilaterals. Hint, they could be more than one. So let's take a look to see. There's a couple of ways that we could do this. We could take a look at one shape at a time and go through all the possible names. Or we could do all of the shapes, all 5 of these shapes, and see if they're a rectangle, a rhombus, or a square, or another quadrilateral. So let's just do one shape at a time. So let's take a look here. I can tell that this shape is 4 sides. All of these are quadrilaterals. I can tell that this side and this side are the same length, and the opposite sides here are the same length. Well, I know the only name for this shape would be a rectangle, and I know that because not only is it a 4-sided shape with 4 right angles, but it cannot be a square or a rhombus because the sides are not the same length. Let's move up over here. This is a 4-sided shape that has 4 right angles, those perfect square corners. All 4 of them are those perfect square corners. And all 4 sides are the same length. So because of that, this shape has 1, 2, 3 names. It's a square because it has all sides that are the same length and 4 right angles. It's a rhombus because it's a quadrilateral with 4 equal sides, the same exact length. And it's a rectangle because it has 4 sides, 4 right angles, and opposite sides are the same. We can call it 3 different names. Let's move over here. We need to take a look at the angles here. So down here is a perfectly horizontal line. If I draw my lines up, you can see these are not right angles. So because these are not right angles, it is definitely not going to be called a square or a rectangle, because for a shape to be a square or a rectangle, you need to have 4 right angles. Could it be a rhombus? Well, a rhombus has to have 4 equal sides. This side and this side are the same length, and the left side and the right side are the same length, but all 4 are not the same. So it's not a rhombus. This quadrilateral is called a parallelogram. I could be spelling this wrong. Parallelogram, I think. A parallelogram, where it has 2 sets of sides that will never cross or intersect each other. Awesome. Let's take a look down here. We've talked a lot about this shape over the past couple of days, and it's been brought up as examples of things that are not what we're going over. So we know that it's 4 sides. Let's take a look at the angles. Let's look down here. Perfectly horizontal line. That would be that's not a perfectly vertical line. Let's use this as an example. Horizontal line, vertical line. You can see this is a less than angle. It's less than a right angle. Because of that, it cannot be a square and it cannot be a rectangle. This is also not a rhombus because all 4 sides are not the same length. I would call this shape a trapezoid. Now, the last shape we're going to go over together is right here. Now, this shape has 4 sides. It has 4 right angles, perfectly squared corners. So far, because it has 4 sides and 4 right angles, I could call it a rhombus, I could call it a rectangle, and I could call it a square. In order for it to be a rhombus, though, all sides need to be the same length. And guess what? They are. So this is another example of a square, of a rhombus. Wait. And a rectangle. Awesome. All right, now you're going to pause the video and you're going to work on number 2 by yourself. So number 2 actually has a couple of things that you need to do. The first thing you need to do is describe what attribute do these shapes have in common. That means you need to look at the lengths, the sides, and the angles and figure out what do all of these have in common. Could I give them all a name? That's up to you. Explain that on some lines in a couple of sentences. And then I want you to draw 2 quadrilaterals that do not belong in this group of shapes. So this is a group of shapes. What are 2 quadrilaterals that would not belong? And you can draw those on your paper. Go ahead and do that. Pause the video, and when you're done, we'll go over your answers. Awesome. I hope we've had some time to answer this question. And I hope what you figured out to be true about all of these shapes is that they're all rectangles. So these shapes are all rectangles because they are quadrilaterals with 4 right angles and the opposite sides are equal. And you can see that right here. So this side is equal to this side is equal to this side. This side is equal to this side, this side is equal to this side. This side is equal to this side, this side is equal to this side, and you can see that. Awesome. So now you had to draw shapes that do not belong in this group. So that means 2 quadrilateral shapes that are not rectangles. The one that I'm going to draw first is a trapezoid, because I know that's not a rectangle. The second quadrilateral I'm going to draw is a parallelogram. Remember, 2 sets of lines that are not going to intersect ever. I'm totally messing up the spelling of parallelogram. I will look that up tonight. The other shape that you could draw here would be a rhombus that does not have right angles. So a rhombus that has greater than angles or less than angles, but a rhombus that does not have right angles, because a rhombus that has right angles would be considered a square, and we know that a square is considered a rectangle. Awesome. If you have any questions on what we went over today, please don't hesitate to reach out to your teacher. Right now you're going to jump in and work on your exit ticket. If you have any questions at all, like I said, definitely reach out about that or anything in this lesson. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will be back tomorrow with a video for our next math lesson when we talk about 3D shapes. Awesome.